The Nigerian Senate and the House of Representatives have passed the Finance Bill for 2023, which outlines the country's tax policy direction for the new year. But several questions hang over the new fiscal document, just as the bigger Nigeria's budget 2023 awaits President Buhari's signature in the next few days. Digging into the Finance Bill 2022, the tax regime and the fiscal economy in the new year is the fiscal policy partner and Africa tax leader at PwC, Taiwo Oyedele. Oyedele is joining me on the line this evening. Here, thank you so much, sir, for coming to. You are the first guest on Arise Exchange in the new year 2023. Congratulations for being the first. And it's great to have you connected for this conversation. I know tax conversation is not as sexy as any other subject, as it were. But let's spend some time to look at what the unfinished business. Do we have any unfinished business in the tax system for the past year, 2020? If we have any, let me know. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you very much and Happy New Year. Yes, the answer to your question is yes. We have a lot of unfinished business, even though I have to say that some progress have been made. But if you look at it very broadly, in terms of the national tax policy, a lot of the things that we said we would do as a country, since 2017, we haven't done a number of them. Notably, think about tax harmonization. We still have multiple taxation all over the place, with small and large businesses paying upward of 60 different taxes based on the approved list of taxes and levies. We still have, politicians and a lot of people who have a lot of money not paying taxes, as we saw during the, people buying forms for, aspiration to be X, Y, not pay taxes. And the national tax policy says we need to set the right tone from the top. We also have instances where the constitution was being amended. That hasn't been completed. And one of the reforms there was to try and address the issue of VAT. And another one is to try and establish revenue courts, both at the federal and the state level, so that we can focus a lot more on revenue matters, which in my view is only second to insecurity in terms of needs. We also haven't been able to use technology efficiently to make paying taxes very simple, but even more importantly, to get intelligence to ensure that everybody economic activity, which based on the law is liable to tax, is paying their fair share of taxes, rather than trying to overburden the few people who are trying to do the right thing. We also haven't responded, in my view, to the emerging economic issues like foreign exchange. We still ask people to pay taxes in dollars in Nigeria. In a country where we spend naira, why are you creating demand for dollars at the expense of your own currency, which is not helping us with the exchange rate? You also have our people who are moving out of the country, this Japa movement thing. And then some of us are saying we need to amend the policies, including the tax policies, to allow our people sit down in Nigeria and get jobs globally. At the moment, they cannot do that because those global employment and the employers abroad, we get into trouble in Nigeria because of the old rules that we still have. So quite a number of areas where I would say we have unfinished business.
So in summary, how did the tax to revenue scenario actually balance out in Nigeria, for Nigeria, in terms of our fiscal position for the year we just put in behind us, in terms of, were we able to balance the books, in a manner of speaking?
Unfortunately, the answer is no. We did not manage to balance the books. I would say if you look at revenue generally, oil revenue was abysmal. For many months, there wasn't a single dollar or naira remitted by the NNPC to the Federation account. We had the FRS try their best. I think we haven't seen the final numbers for 2022 as of yet. I think that will be out in a matter of next couple of weeks. But the target for the FRS is they hope they'll be able to reach 10 trillion naira. And for many parts of the year, most of the revenue flowing to the Federation accounts shared by the three levels of government have been coming from taxes, but it's still not enough. And that is why the level of deficit as well as the government borrowing has been growing out of proportion. For about 6 months, first 6 months of 2022, the cost of servicing debt alone was more than the revenue accruing to the federal government. I think at some point it was over 118%. Of course, with those pictures, you would say that we did not manage, unfortunately, to balance the revenue position vis-a-vis our rising expenditure profile. And unfortunately, also, we don't have leaders who are prudent enough. You still see here and there, if it's not corruption allegation by the Accountant General of the Federation, it will be the president who pardoned people who we managed to have convicted of dipping their hands into the taxpayers' pocket, treasury. And these things don't help with the tax morale that we are trying to improve in Nigeria, such that at the end of the day, across all levels of government, whether it's local government, we don't even know what they are collecting. We don't see their accounts. But for state, they collected about 1.8 trillion the previous year. And that's also not enough. FRS, 10 trillion, customs service. Overall, we have made small progress, but we need to move the needle significantly going forward.
So we need to move the needle moving forward significantly. Do you consider the raising of tertiary education tax from 2.5% to 3% as that moving the needle forward significantly? What are the key focus areas in the current year for you, Taiwo Oyedele, in terms of taxes that both the corporate and individual should expect? Today is the 2nd of January. I need to know. Tell me.
Yeah, so the tertiary education tax, the lawmakers are proposing that it should increase from 2.5% to 3%. I need to say that just last year, okay, maybe it's not last year now, the previous year, which was 2021, was when they increased it from 2% to 2.5%. And over the past 10 years, the revenue generated from tertiary education tax has been over 2 trillion naira. And as a Nigerian and also a business person who is paying this tax myself, I keep asking, how come there's no question around accountability? How is the 2 trillion that we have contributed in tertiary education tax, how has it been spent? Are there issues with governance? Are there issues with prudence? Are there issues with efficiency, with transparency, with accountability? We should not always assume that whenever we have a small problem, we can solve it by getting more money. My view is that increasing the tax rate now to 3% from 2.5 is not only wrong timing, it's also trying to address the problem the wrong way. Because I'm very confident that the 3% still will not solve the problem. What we need to do is to interrogate how we are spending the little we are collecting and find areas of efficiency rather than place more burden on already overburdened and struggling private sector and businesses. So in terms of the taxes that businesses and individuals should expect, I would say based on the finance bill that may become law in the next few days if assented to by the president, companies should expect maybe tertiary education tax will go up, even though we are still advocating against it. We also have provisions in the law to roll back some incentives like investment allowance. Before now, if a company bought assets like plants and machinery, they got an investment allowance of 10%. Government says, well, they cannot afford it anymore, and they're rolling that back to withdraw it. We also have provisions to do with, capital gain tax and losses. Government is now saying if you make a loss by selling an asset, it would allow you to claim deduction. That's a positive one because before now you couldn't claim a loss, but you are taxed on gains, which was really not fair at all. We also have a provision where government is saying let's impose excise duty on all services, including telecommunication. I'm hoping that this will not go through because I don't know of any country in the world where you have VAT and then you also have excise duties on all services. We don't even know whether that will cover, medical, whether it will cover training. We don't know. And for individuals, government is saying we're going to tax crypto. So I don't know whether it's a good time as well. People are making losses on crypto, and government is saying we may also be taxing you. So generally, we have a lot of areas of taxes overall. More taxes from the pocket of businesses and individuals than what government is giving. But I don't think that these would move the needle in terms of government revenue because at the federal government level, the budget deficit was initially about 10.7 trillion. The lawmakers, in their wisdom, increased it even further. And then there's a supplementary budget that was passed. So altogether, you're looking at about 12 trillion deficit. At the state level, all combined, about 5 trillion. So 17 trillion, this movement will not make the budget to balance. So we still need to do more.
You just talking about balancing the budget in a manner of speaking. So how does tax revenue play into the budgeting process, using the 2023 as an example? You're just touching on the numbers. We need tax to fund the budget. How do we fund it? The deficit as well and all of that. Does tax revenue, does it really count? Can it really do anything for us under the current situation we find ourselves?
Yes, tax revenue would always count. And I think, in fact, for us to have a sustainable revenue structure for funding our budget on a year-to-year basis, it has to be based on taxes, because we can't rely on crude oil, especially with oil theft and, in my view, a lot of mismanagement in that sector. We also can't just hope that somebody will give us aid, because other countries too are trying to struggle and take care of themselves. So we need to rely on tax revenue. But in terms of our approach, it has to be that we try and enable businesses to prosper. And when they make more money, they can then pay more taxes, not by increasing the rate of taxes or introducing new taxes. So when you look at the budget, both at the federal and the state level, the gaps are just too wide. And I also think that the recurrent portion of our budget has been rising too fast. So in the 2023 budget for the federal government and for the state government, the current portion is the highest. And then you also find that the cost of servicing debt is growing significantly. When you also have leakages around like subsidy, around inefficiency in government. So those things are not really helping us. And if you look at the process for the finance bill, it's also disappointing that the lawmakers decided to pass the bill without engaging with stakeholders. The Senate published the bill on 21st of December and said the public hearing was the following day. Who does that? The House of Representatives said their own public hearing will be 13th of January, only to turn around and pass the bill without any public hearing. So these things don't give confidence, and it doesn't help us with the fact that we need a lot of revenue. If the approach of government is not very inclusive and is not data-driven in terms of the decisions they are trying to make. So we really need to do better.
We need to do better. But again, talking about tax and what we said, there's about a tertiary education tax. There are reports that we've collected about 2 trillion naira in tertiary education tax over the last 10 years. So where is the money? You have any idea where it is?
I wish I know where the money is. I can tell you that the lecturers were on strike for about 8 months. I can tell you that some of us who have students that we are sponsoring in school, we know that they are paying for everything. We know that the quality is not there, whether you're talking about equipment, whether you're talking about laboratory, whether you're talking about research, whatever it is, the standard is not there. I'm not saying 2 trillion would have solved all the problems, but it would have been nice for a public report account showing that this is the 2 trillion we've collected over the 10 years. This is how we have spent the money. And then we can all say, well, we think that they need more money. But if nobody is explaining how the money is spent, in fact, when I looked at the account by the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, I saw that some of the universities were just even as terrible as politicians in how the money has been spent. And some of the queries were there, and then nobody did anything about it. So I would say that clearly, and it's not only tertiary education tax, we have it everywhere. There's NITDA for technology development. There's one they introduced last year for police. There's another one for NASENI, that's engineering and technology. So we have these taxes all over the place. In fact, there's a bill to introduce another one for NYSC. And I keep saying to myself, if you are doing something and it's not working, you cannot continue to do it and expect a different result. They say that's the definition of insanity. We have to then take a step backwards and say maybe the money is not our problem. Maybe it's governance, and try and address governance first and foremost, so that whatever little money you can raise is put to the most productive use, given that the people that are paying the taxes are not plucking the money on any tree. They have to work very hard, whether they are individuals or whether they are businesses.
Is it any good news that there's an exemption for upstream and midstream gas operators, along with agro-allied businesses and manufacturers in the other restriction of capital allowance? Is there something somewhere for corporates this new year, 2023? Give me some good news, Taiwo.
I've been trying to look for the good news myself. Apart from the capital loss that government says we can now deduct before we pay tax on any gain we make when you sell shares, for example, or you sell a building. That's only real good news. And maybe also, another one is that government says if you pay premium for your life assurance and that of your spouse or an annuity, then the amount you pay for that premium, you can claim it as a tax deduction, but you must keep the policy for at least 5 years. Those are the little good news. Now, the question you asked about the gas companies being exempted from capital allowance restriction is not really an incentive. It's just government saying, I'm punishing other people. When you have capital allowances, you cannot claim everything because government says you must still pay some tax every single year. And they are saying for the gas companies, like manufacturing and agri, they allow them to claim their allowances. It's not a gift from government. It's just that we remove the punishment that others are having to go through. And unfortunately, in this finance bill as well, government says that for gas flaring company, in other words, any company that flares gas, their own corporate income tax rate will go up from 30% to 50%. Notwithstanding that, based on my own knowledge of that industry, government is even the biggest stakeholder in terms of interest in those oil-producing assets, and government has not been contributing its own portion for the investment that they need to reduce gas flaring, which is gas flare out. And then to turn around, when government has not played its own part, to then punish the operators, for me doesn't look like a good policy at all, because that would discourage investment, especially at this time when Europe is looking for alternative sources of gas, and we could easily attract billions of dollars to invest in that sector. Plus, also government had said that gas will be our transition fuel to move us from full fossil fuel to clean energy. So you can't then be introducing policies that are contradicting your aspiration and your policy objectives.
Okay, so I'm like right now is going on the screen, trend analysis of our debt, of our revenue, debt servicing and expenditure. And the revenue is the orange line that goes up there. Then you've got the debt servicing are there, and I've seen a bit of a divergence from 2020. It looks like between 2015, 2016, and 17 and 18, we tend to be looking. Things seem to calm down a little bit, a bit of a convergence, close in 2019. But from 2020 to 2022, and now heading into 2023 with a bit of an outlook there, it doesn't really look like things are looking pretty good. So I'm going to go back. How much issue, what challenges do you think we face in terms of balancing our revenue, debt servicing, expenditure, this metrics, this kind of a trilemma where we find ourselves right now? How worse do you think things will get in the current year, 2023? Tell me give me all the bad news now. Let me take it all in.
I really wish I have good news to give you instead. Unfortunately, it's not looking very good. It's not looking very good because for 2023, government says they're going to have a deficit of 11 trillion. The lawmakers added 1.3 trillion to it. And there's a supplementary budget that they passed just a few days to the end of last year, which for me, I'm still surprised that you're getting into a new year. Why don't you just increase the size of the budget? Why part another supplementary budget? If you take all of that together, you have 12 trillion hole in the budget. The government is even saying, if I can collect the revenue that I aspire to collect, if you follow the trend over the past 5 years or thereabout, government has not met their revenue target year on year. Let's say this year is going to be an exception and they meet that target, there will still be 12 trillion naira deficit. At the state level, there will be about 5 trillion naira deficit. What that means is you should expect about 12 trillion at the federal level, right? About 5 trillion maybe at the subnational, added to the national debt that we currently have, which is rising by the day. And because interest rates are going up, what that means is the cost of servicing that debt is also likely to rise. When the cost of servicing debt is going up because debt is increasing very fast and revenue is not increasing as much, you are likely going to find a debt service ratio to revenue that is close to 100%. Now, that is not a picture you want to see for any country. And that is not sustainable. If you don't reverse that trend over the next few years, our case will not be very different. They say, God forbid, from Sri Lanka, from Zimbabwe, from Zambia at some point last year or year before, and maybe even Ghana. So we need to try and address this as a matter of national emergency because we don't have all the time. Unfortunately, this year, 2023, is also a transition year where it's the year of two hands.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That the new administration, therefore, this is not going to be an easy pick. It's not a walk in the park for whoever becomes the next president and his cabinet ministers, central bank governor, finance minister, and the whole 36 state governors from June the 1st moving forward. Is that what you're saying means on a fiscal space?
Yeah, it won't be an easy job for whoever is going to be the next CEO of Nigeria. It will be a lot of hard work, but it's not an impossible task and it's not rocket science. Some of the things that we need to do just require political will. For example, remove fuel subsidy. That's a loan will save 4 to 6 trillion naira. Do tax harmonization so that you don't have 63 different agencies collecting revenue. Get one agency to collect revenue, and that way you can block a lot of leakages and inefficiency and all manners of agencies using consultants to drain Nigeria's revenue for private purposes. If you also use technology, I call it data for tax. If you use technology to connect all the intelligence within the system, whether you are spending money, whether you are saving and investing, whether it's international passports, whether you are buying land or buying vehicle, whatever economic activities you do, like they do in every country, we link that together and we see actually that many people who are in the tax net are currently there with just one finger because they are not paying anywhere near what they should be paying. That information becomes visible to government, and you can then follow those guys and make sure they pay the right amount of tax. And government itself has to lead by example. Government MDAs must pay the right amount of taxes. Politicians must pay their taxes. Our leaders must also be accountable for how they spend the money. If the next CEO of Nigeria is willing to do all of this, I am very confident that over the next 1 to 2 years, we see a significant turnaround. And I expect that our tax to GDP ratio should move from around 6% where it is now to close to 15% where it needs to be.
Okay, so I'm sure you're not suggesting that we should open the tax papers of all the previous presidents, or perhaps we start from the current one, like Donald Trump's been done in the US. But again, maybe you think we should change the name of FIRS to something else, Nigeria Revenue Service. Maybe that will help this year. But again, we appreciate your insights as always in this conversation. Have a great evening, and we wish you all the best. Taiwo Oyedele, Fiscal Policy Partner and Africa Tax Leader at PwC.